done better. Thank you.
And that brings order. That brings to a close questions for oral answer. I have received a letter from Grant Robertson seeking to debate under Standing Order 386 the release of the inquiry by the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security into the circumstances of unlawful interception of communications of certain individuals by the Government Communications Security Bureau. This release is a case of recent occurrence involving ministerial responsibility. The Inspector General's report was released at 1:42 p.m. today. Mr. Robertson's application was received by me at 1:55 p.m. today. I also received an application relating to the same matter from Dr. Russell Norman at 2:29 p.m. today. Applications for urgent debates must be received before the House sits. However, given the current public interest in the performance of intelligence agencies and the need for a high level of public confidence in their activities in relation to New Zealand, I've given a particular consideration to Mr. Robertson's application that was in before the House sat today. As there will not be an opportunity to debate the matter for some weeks now, I call on Mr. Robertson to move that the House take note of a matter of urgent public importance.
Mr. Speaker, I so move. What an incompetent shambles this government is at the moment. What we have seen, Mr. Speaker, around the actions of the GCSB and the whole of the Kim.com case is a circus from the government and its agencies. And the ringmaster of that circus is John Key. John Key is the person who has the oversight on behalf of all New Zealanders for our security agency. He is the sole democratic check on how our security agencies behave. In fact, it's written in law, Mr. Speaker. Section 8.3 of the GCSB Act says that the functions of the Bureau are subject to the control of the Minister. That is a significantly higher test, Mr. Speaker, than almost any other ministerial responsibility that there is. And yet, this Minister has been unable to tell us anything about the activities of his agency, the agency that spies on people. These are serious powers that the people of New Zealand accept will be provided for if there is a democratic check. That democratic check is the Prime Minister, and he has not fulfilled his responsibilities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister doesn't seem to know anything about Kim.com. He claims that the first time he heard of him was on the 19th of January 2012. Well, Mr. Speaker, by the time the Prime Minister had heard of Kim.com, the following people who interact with the Prime Minister on a reasonably regular basis had. The Solicitor General knew, the police knew, Ofcans knew, Crown Law knew, John Banks knew, but then he forgot. Maurice Williamson knew, Jonathan Coleman knew, Simon Power knew, Nigel Bickle from Immigration New Zealand knew, the media knew, John Key's electorate office knew because they'd had contact with Kim.com, and then a man named Chris, who was a contractor on Kim.com's mansion, knew as well. But John Key didn't know. Chris the contractor had worked it out, but John Key didn't know that Kim.com was in his own electorate. It defies belief, Mr. Speaker, and it speaks of a Prime Minister who is so relaxed that he is now so casual that he is not even bothering to provide proper oversight for the organisations for which he is responsible. Mr. Speaker, here is the list of things that Mr. Key doesn't know. As we've said, he didn't know about Kim.com until the day before the police raid. He didn't know until 2 weeks ago that the GCSB, the organisation under his control, was actually spying on Kim.com and his associates on behalf of the police. Until this week, he apparently didn't even know that a ministerial certificate to prevent details of what the GCSB had been doing was provided by his deputy, Bill English, as acting Prime Minister. And what New Zealand is being asked to believe is that when Bill English, acting as Prime Minister on behalf of John Key, signs off a ministerial certificate, that John Key won't know about it. that John Key's Chief of Staff wasn't involved, that any of his staff. I was once a staff member in a Prime Minister's office, and I can tell this House with certainty that when the Prime Minister is away, the Prime Minister's office staff continue to work for the acting Prime Minister, particularly, Mr. Speaker, on an issue of national security. And we are asked to believe that Bill English didn't think to tell the Prime Minister, didn't think to brief him when he came back to New Zealand, didn't tell him at the various cabinet meetings that have taken place. He simply didn't bother to say anything. And we are asked to believe that. If that is true, Mr. Speaker, it speaks of a dysfunctional government, unable to communicate with one another about serious matters such as the national security of New Zealand. And while we're talking about Mr. English and that ministerial certificate, the ministerial certificate says that Mr. English has spoke with the GCSB about their activities. He had to take advice from them before he signed the ministerial certificate. So he knew about the activities of the GCSB, yet he supposedly didn't tell the Prime Minister. All of these people are in the Prime Minister's life who know this, and somehow he doesn't know about it. And wasn't even able to tell this House about whether his department, the Prime Minister's department, actually knew anything about it either. This is a minister whose attitude is now so relaxed that he's completely taken his eye off the ball. And New Zealanders deserve better from the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. No matter which party is in charge, New Zealanders will expect that oversight of our security agencies is taken seriously. Mr. Key told this House he had 15 meetings with the GCSB this year. What was he discussing? Were they talking about the rugby or something? He clearly doesn't appear to have any information about the serious matters that the GCSB is involved in. And once again, the oversight function that the Minister has to provide is simply not being provided. Mr. Speaker, the New Zealand Herald said in the editorial yesterday that the Prime Minister is the sole democratic cheek for New Zealanders on security agencies. He has let New Zealanders down on this issue. But, Mr. Speaker, it's as if Kim.com has some kind of amnesia field around him that causes people like John Banks and John Key to conveniently forget important details about what is going on in their areas. Mr. .com came to New Zealand in a blaze of publicity. He then set fire to $500,000 worth of fireworks to celebrate his residency, and the Prime Minister didn't notice, and apparently neither did the GCSB. Now, Mr. Speaker, the focus for this investigation that Justice Naser has undertaken is the activities of the GCSB. And when we look at where Justice Naser falls in terms of why things went wrong, it boils down to this. The GCSB was not apparently capable of understanding their own legislation as to who a permanent resident is. They weren't capable of understanding that the Immigration Act had been changed in 2009 to alter the definitions around who a permanent resident was. They weren't capable between the police or Ofcans and the GCSB of actually having a look at the immigration file, which Immigration New Zealand have said that they passed to police. But even having said that, Mr. Speaker, the law was changed, but there was a whole year between when the law was changed and when the police raid took place and the surveillance took place. A whole year. It defies belief that our agencies, the security agency, is that incompetent that they could not stay in touch with their own law. And clearly the oversight of the minister in charge was lacking, if that is the reason that they committed this error. Mr. Speaker, in Justice Naser's report, there's also a statement around how it is that the GCSB even came to be involved in this situation. Because the GCSB's role is to monitor foreign nationals, not to monitor New Zealand citizens or permanent residents. However, Justice Naser in his report has said that the GCSB does have a role in assisting other agencies. And it appears from the report that the reason that's now been given is that the police felt that in some way Mr. .com and his associates represented a danger. And that is to New Zealanders. And that is the excuse that has now been used. Now, I don't have the evidence in front of me, but on that excuse, the GCSB then proceeded to be involved in this case. And the Prime Minister, as the minister responsible for that, should have known about this, should have been advised about this. And we have to bear in mind that this is a case involving the United States government. This is a case where there was an extradition order signed at the highest levels of the US government. And we're expected to believe that John Key didn't know about that. Murray McCully must have known about it. He has to have known about an extradition order involving Kim.com. But remember, the Prime Minister says he knew nothing about it until the raid itself. Not only that, we have a situation here where the FBI are involved. The FBI and the US government are involved. That would twig in most people's minds that this was quite a serious issue. But apparently not in these agencies, and apparently not in the mind of the Prime Minister, who is meant to be providing the oversight for this. Mr. Speaker, it is quite clear that there has been a massive breakdown in communication among agencies. Those agencies have apologised today, or the GCSB has. Where is the Prime Minister's apology? Where is the Prime Minister's apology to New Zealand for his failure to provide the oversight that he has told New Zealanders that he has signed up to under this Act? We've had an apology from the officials, but we've had no apology from the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has the job of control of the functions of this Bureau, and he has failed in that. The other agency, a security agency that the Prime Minister has some responsibility for, is the SIS. And, Mr. Speaker, it's quite clear that the SIS did have some knowledge of what happened in the situation. They were involved in the early days around the granting of the residency. Again, another agency that reports to Mr. Key on a regular basis knew this. So what we now have, Mr. Speaker, is a staggering display of incompetence by government agencies, a minister who does not take seriously his oversight responsibilities, and a situation where the New Zealand taxpayer may be exposed to costs because of this incompetency, and a situation where New Zealanders are losing confidence in the security agencies, losing confidence in the social contract that says, yes, we will allow there to be some spying that takes place, but only if we know that there's some kind of democratic oversight. That democratic oversight is provided by the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has let New Zealanders down. They deserve better from a person whose job it is to act on our behalf as citizens and residents of this country to ensure that our security agencies behave well. There are so many unanswered questions in this debacle, Mr. Speaker. It is quite clear that Mr. Key will have to front up again to this House and explain how it is possible that he did not know that Kim.com was in this country until he was briefed about the raids. It is implausible that he didn't know, but more than that, he has let New Zealanders down by his lax oversight of his security agencies that he controls on our behalf. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, this report that we are debating today does not represent the end of this matter. It is a whitewash. There are questions around whether the Inspector General can appropriately undertake this inquiry given his ongoing role working with the GCSB. This situation deserves a thorough investigation so that we can get to the bottom of what role was played by the agencies of government, what role was played by ministers, why the Prime Minister was not informed about these situations, because in the absence of that kind of investigation, Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders will look at what the Prime Minister has done and they will question his honesty. And if New Zealanders are questioning the honesty of the Prime Minister, that is a serious matter. This needs a thorough, independent investigation so New Zealanders can have confidence in their security services and get to the bottom of this. This has been a shambles and a circus from this government. It has been staggering incompetence. There has been incredibly poor communication. The government needs to take responsibility, and ultimately, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister needs to take responsibility for this debacle.
Mr. Speaker,
I call the Honourable Minister Chris Finlayson.
I will